So we've asked Ruse Moleshe, an energy and infrastructure finance specialist, to shed some light on the transmission development plan and the current power outages. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps first, before we get into some of the details that were outlined, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about a TDP, and why is it important for us to know?
When we talk about the transmission development plan, it's a plan that Eskom, it's a 10-year plan that they put together that talks about expansion of infrastructure, new investment, maintenance of that infrastructure to make sure that all the power generation facilities that the country has are able to connect and transmit the power to where it's supposed to be, where the customers are, in a nutshell.
Okay. So it says, Eskom, in its plan that there's a need for the deployment of 170 transformers with a capacity of over 100,000 MVAs, right, along with 40 capacities, 52 reactors. So there's a lot of details for some of us to talk about it. But in terms of a reliable grid operation and the integration of new generation capacity and load centers, how is this going to work?
Yeah, so in terms of, Eskom has identified certain corridors where there's likely to be new capacity of renewable energy and other sources, where the lines will be needed, the transmission lines will be needed, in particularly the Northern Cape, the Eastern Cape, and the Western Cape. So this plan talks about, for instance, Eskom, we know, had problems with financial resources. So it talks about accelerating this new capacity and expansion of existing capacity in the next 5 years to make sure that they don't fall short. You know, when you develop a generation power plant, you have to connect it through the system so that you can connect to all. So if Eskom were to fall short in terms of the transmission network, then we would have a problem. For instance, if I can make an example, in the Northern Cape right now, that's the area with the greatest resources in terms of solar resources. However, because of the constraints of the network there, some of the projects are now moving to the Free State, KwaZulu-Natal. It's still good resources, but not as great as the Northern Cape. So that would be the impact of not having enough capacity to be able to connect.
I understand that the plan deviates from earlier editions by proposing a front loading in the coming 5 years of investments in new transformers to unlock that 16.6 gigawatts of grid capacity. Please explain this and how that's going to work along with the introduction of major new power corridors.
Yeah, so what Eskom is doing, they are setting the target from up to 2031, making assumptions based on the integrated resource plan. Obviously, the integrated resource plan is under development right now, so changes could be there. But what they are saying is that the president has said that they need to work urgently, work earnestly to make sure that capacity is available to support new generation capacity. So the emphasis on the 72.2 billion by 2027 is that accelerated plan, which will make sure that the new generation generation capacity that comes online is able to be met with infrastructure that's available.
So just on that, the value of the investment, over 70 billion rand, we understand that there's uncertainty as to the extent to which government is going to, if at all, bail out Eskom. Government has been talking also about the lack of FDI. So where's the money projected to come from?
So what they talk about, I mean, yesterday the Minister of Finance indicated that they would be able to help Eskom with anything between a third or a two-thirds of the 400 billion debt that they have. That is expected to strengthen Eskom's balance sheet and at least be able to be stronger as an entity. That's number one. Number two, the National Transmission Company that was supposed to be ring-fenced, which is the most performing within Eskom, is in the process. They expect by 2024 that should be ring-fenced. The lenders will come to the party and there will be an agreement. So Eskom will look relatively better. But he did say that this is all subject to Eskom having servitudes that are approved and also the budget coming along. But we expect that that injection that is supposed to come, or that reduction of debt that is supposed to come from National Treasury, will make Eskom look relatively better than it is today.
So there was also talk of the constrained resource capacity across the engineering, procurement and construction value chain spaces. How is Eskom going to meet that challenge?
Yeah, there is a constraint, and the constraint is related also to worldwide constraints. For instance, China, one of the biggest manufacturers of solar PV systems, is one of the biggest manufacturers of infrastructure and logistics related to importing some of this equipment that's required in South Africa. And that would, I guess, extend to the transmission infrastructure. It's just constrained, there's a constraint in the market with relation to that. I suppose that affects everybody, and it could end up affecting Eskom's plans as well. But because everybody knows that there is that problem, we assume that they will make a plan in terms of making sure, for instance, the ordering of equipment is done well in advance to be able to cater for those time lags.
So this plan, what does it mean? I mean, at the beginning of October, we had the Eskom CEO saying that South Africa faces another 18 months of regular power cuts and won't be able to end them until sufficient generating capacity is added to the electricity grid to meet demand. But he was also speaking of a period of about a year and a half that we have to hang in for. So all of these developments, I mean, let's bring it down now to the ordinary man's concerns. Are we going to be able to keep the lights on? We're talking about load shedding going into the weekend, but it seems like the reality is, and we're told time and time again, that it's here to stay.
Yeah. So if I break down this into three parts, there's the generation side where the electricity is produced. Then there's the lines where the electricity is transmitted. So from the generation side, we still have capacity constraints. We still have energy availability that is less than 60%. So the transmission, this plan was about the transmission. So the issues that we have with respect to generation still remain, unfortunately. And we still have a capacity constraint. We're still going to expect load shedding. But if we were to struggle with this plan and not implement it accordingly, this would worsen the situation even further, because now that generation capacity would be developed, but it would not be able to be transmitted to where it's supposed to be. So it's quite important that both the generation capacity is developed and the transmission infrastructure in line with generation is also developed. But we still remain with the problem of not having enough capacity to meet the demand today, and that's going to take a while to address.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Ruse Moleshe, and simplifying it for us, an energy and infrastructure finance specialist on Eskom's announcement of a transmission development plan. I think that goes up to 2038.